What's the situation looking like in some of the country's routes? Newzroom Afrika's senior reporter Tumaole Mohlaoli is with us in studio. He's actually been traversing some of the routes themselves in Johannesburg and other areas. Great to see you again, sir. Thanks very much indeed for popping in.
Yes.
I wonder whether or not we should be concerned by what we're seeing so far, especially in places like in Mpumalanga, where in the last 48 hours, there have been 2 major accidents already. What have you been able to witness whilst on the N1, for instance?
Yes, on the N1, in fact, I was with Simon Zwane of RTMC at the carousel. I went all the way as far as Kranskop in Limpopo province.
Sure.
But what we were witnessing there is that certainly police visibility is extremely high. And one thing that they are targeting is overloading of vehicles. So you find vehicles making their way to Limpopo, and some are actually going to pass through Limpopo into Zimbabwe. And they are loaded right above capacity, and officers have been very, very, how can I say, vigilant, and pulling them over, checking if their weight restrictions are met. If not, they are ushered to the side of the road and they're allowed to go no further. Also, motorists who are in the commuting business, taking commuters back and forth, are also regularly checked and stopped, whether they are licensed to do so, whether their vehicles are roadworthy, and also if the passengers are wearing masks. I was not able to ascertain if any vaccinations were checked or not, but that didn't seem to be the case. As long as people were masked up and they weren't overloaded and there was enough space, they were certainly allowed to go through. And it has seemed to be no concessions being made to people carrying liquor in their vehicles. So if you are planning to drive, whether it's open or closed, chances are you will be stopped. Don't take the chance, especially if you have open liquor. They will lock you up.
Sure. I mean, there have been various concerns from health experts around the spread of the COVID-19 virus as people move around the country. And initially, we actually weren't sure whether people would actually be traveling. The sense I'm getting from you is people are really taking the advantage of being on level 1 of the lockdown and are heading to wherever they've wanted to be, I imagine, for months.
Yes, absolutely. And this is a direct result of the negative impact the various levels have had in terms of restrictions in travels interprovincially. Of course, the traveling and hospitality industry has raised much concern, saying that it is on its knees and the country's economy can ill afford to have really another hard lockdown. President Cyril Ramaphosa, as well as ministers in the cabinet, have made, including the health ministry, the announcements that, it's been a hard 2 years or so where people have had to deal with really hard restrictions in terms of moving. And perhaps with the inoculation drive, not necessarily reaching the levels that were hoped, but with the successes, with the pop-ups that have been happening right throughout the various months, it is anticipated that people are allowed to go home now and really just woosa is the word that one would use after a very difficult period. However, restrictions in terms of COVID-19 protocols are still in place. Sanitize, mask up, and people are encouraged not to go to heavily saturated areas, like festivals and so forth. But and when people indulge, the alcohol industry has also been crying foul, saying that they need to get jobs secured because they are basically bleeding a lot of jobs. We've seen how small operators like shebeens and taverns have also said that we will comply. People will be expected to sanitize, to mask up. They can buy their liquor and then go drink in their places of residence or their own private residence to keep people off the roads. Pedestrians are also a big concern, I must say, for the RTMC. Don't drink and walk. It's not only don't drink and drive, but don't go staggering on the side of the freeway or the roads inebriated. If you are going to walk, be visible. So certainly the messaging has been strong. Now it's up to us, the public, to play our part and assist the government and the various agencies.
Absolutely. Wusa is probably the word, actually, given the year we've just had.
Absolutely.
But, COVID was always going to complicate things.
Yes,
I remember in the past, at least at the initial stages of the pandemic, there was real concerns, for instance, about how you check people's alcohol level in a context where you need to blow into a breathalyzer for a highly infectious respiratory disease.
Yes.
I mean, from your observations, what you've been able to see over the past couple of days, how are officers at least taking into consideration the fact that they too shouldn't be vehicles that pass on the virus from one motorist to another through their checks?
Absolutely. Well, what the officers that I've observed, they are also very highly masked up, and some are even wearing gloves. And when they stop the vehicles, if there is no mobile testing unit, now what has happened is that in the last few weeks and days, the RTMC has partnered up with the private sector and they have had a multi-million rand donation, including from the liquor industry, of very specialized vehicles. Now, what these vehicles, they're basically kumbis, if I can use that colloquialism, which is minibus vehicles, and they've been converted inside. So when a motorist is stopped and officer ushers him out of the vehicle, already what happens is that there's a screener, the type that you see at the airport, that gauges temperature. If there's any kind of concern that this person, either the temperature is high or they are displaying signs of being, inebriated or slightly in the spirit, so to speak, slurred speech and things like that, they are ushered to their vehicle, and there are COVID tests that are ready to be taken there. And also at the vehicle, there are also alcohol tests, sealed, of course. There are officials within the vehicle wearing gloves. They will be masked up, and the person will be able then to blow into a breathalyzer, and that sample will be sealed and kept, and their details are taken. If it is felt that they can't go any further, they will then be ushered to the side of the road where they can try and weigh off the impact of what they have. But also alcohol samples from blood will be taken to ensure that, of course, it's a watertight case. What the law enforcement officers don't want is for contaminated samples to then go to court if it does reach that level, and cases are then thrown out, and it's just, big egg on their faces. They're making sure that the message is clear, that it's zero tolerance. Don't take the chance.
And that's probably worth emphasizing. Just because we're going through a pandemic, don't think that some of those practices, for lack of a better term, to check whether or not you should be on the road can be circumvented. It would be interesting to also find out how our airports are doing in a context where we've just come off the UK red list. It's certainly an agenda that's on your to-do list. It's
an agenda that's high on my to-do list. Today, the plan is to go out to OR Tambo International Airport just to gauge what the situation is on the ground. OR Tambo International Airport has said on record that, of course, they are ready for being an influx, if possible, of tourists coming in, both locally. Regionally is more what they are expecting, because we're off the red list, we will wait to see if there will be the traditional influx of tourists coming in from Europe and other destinations to make merry this festive season across our various destinations. I'm sure Short Left and other tourism bodies will be hard at work to ensure that they assure the tourists that they'll be safe, and precautions will be taken. So I'll be watching very closely. There's a big announcement board there showing flights coming in and out, but I suppose that domestic will be the biggest focus to try and kickstart our economy again. But of course, the big issue will be COVID-19 safety protocols. And I can tell you on the flights, when you get in, they are just really sanitized to the fullest. A big mist hits you, and before you even go in there, of course, you're checked, you're scanned, and in some instances, if you have to go cross-border, you have to show your vaccination certificate. So we'll wait and see what happens there.
I'll tell you what, most sane and rational people have taken some time off. You and I have decided on the contrary.
Yeah, we are in the thick of it. That's what it is. It never stops.
Doing what we got to do. Tumaole Mohlaoli, our senior reporter here at Newzroom Afrika, watching the situation as it unfolds. And you can just gauge from that brief conversation that the issue around travel in this country, because of the pandemic, is so interconnected to many other matters as well. And that's why it'll certainly be high on our agenda. Tumaole Mohlaoli, once again, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.